beginning of humanity, but the way we interact with music and what music means continues to evolve and change over time. I've come to Brazil to talk about my work with music in places of conflict and in war zones. At many music industry events, we talk about new platforms and new technologies for people to connect and engage with music. But quite often we forget that the majority of the people on the planet not only can't access those technologies, but don't find those technologies relevant to how they want to interact with music. So what I wanted to do is take us on a journey today to explore this question about what is music, what does it do, what does it mean in the world. And I wanted to start this conversation from a kind of quite a strange place. So I wanted to start the conversation from something that we all have in common, the only certainty that we all have, which is, and it's quite morbid, that we're all going to eventually, and hopefully very far in the future, we're going to die. And I wanted us to think about our funerals. I wanted to think about what would happen in our funeral. I wanted to start this talk in a place that we can all relate to. And what could be a better place to think about a piece of music that you love than at your own funeral, where you can share the ultimate expression of who you were and the memories and moments in your life with the people who you love. So I thought we could start in this place to really understand the power of music. So what piece of music would you have played at your funeral, surrounded by all the people who care about you, who loved you, and who will carry on after you? And I wanted you to think about why you would choose that particular piece of music. Interestingly, most people choose music to encapsulate their life in their funeral, because it would seem that in those 3 minutes, music is the most powerful way to express who you were. So you might have thought about it already, and I think a lot of people have, because I did a kind of poll on Facebook and there was an incredible response. So I want to kind of explore what you would have played at your funeral. So just for a moment, close your eyes and think of what that song would be and why you would have that particular song. So the question for me is, why did you select that music? What did that piece of music express? What did it invoke in you? What was the meaning in that music? What did you want people to experience when they heard that music? I did this poll on Facebook and I asked people why they would choose the songs that they chose. People said that it represented them, that it captured a moment in their lives, that it left people with a kind of certain feeling, or people just wanted to create some kind of sense of celebration. And I think a good way of thinking about the power of music is imagining your funeral with an absence of any music. How would that feel? Would that feel right? For me, music is incredibly powerful. We end our lives with music, and music has been the soundtrack to all of our lives. Each soundtrack completely unique, characterized by time and space. Music is so important in our lives that it's kind of the last thing that happens when we die. When I started thinking about this talk today and the work that we do in places of conflict and war zones with music, it really led me on a journey, and the central question became really simple. What is music? What is the power of music? What are all of the meanings of music that we can explore? Sorry, I don't have a clicker, so I have to kind of, and again. Okay, so in order to do this, I wanted to think about what music means to me and what the soundtrack of my life is, so that I could kind of think about what music means. So my soundtrack started when I was in my mother's womb, and she would play me Frank Zappa before I was even born. When I was 10 years old, my parents bought me an electric guitar, and I learned how to play, and I played in many bands, and I toured around the UK. I did my first gig when I was 14 years old. I used to love collecting CDs and records, and every Saturday from the age of about 13, I'd go down to the local record shops in Manchester, and I would try and find the rarest, the most unique, the most brilliant records that I could find, the ones that I thought nobody else would have. My first gig was going to see The Pretenders when I was about 13 years old or 14 years old. And I played in an iconic band from Manchester called The Fall for a short while. Manchester has been the kind of essence of my musical spirit. Bands like New Order, Joy Division, The Happy Mondays, Black Grape. to me, just sound like Manchester. They sound like my city. And iconic Manchester record label, Factory Records, the founder of the label, Tony Wilson, said, you can either make money, you can make history, or you can make art. And this statement profoundly impacted on everything that I did with the rest of my life after I heard it. Bands like the Buzzcocks carved a way for a DIY movement starting out in Manchester, where people wouldn't let them play in their venues. They created their own shows, they created their own marketing posters and so on. And this DIY movement rippled around the world. My first ever festival was the amazing Glastonbury Festival in the UK, and that's where I saw PJ Harvey wearing this pink catsuit. And that moment of seeing her perform, again, changed my life again, because I thought women can do this so brilliantly and even better than men. When I was about 21, I started a record label, and I was able to then kind of source and release the music that I really loved, primarily from Manchester, but from all over the world. And a little bit later in my 20s, I started a music movement called Unconvention, which was all about kind of responding to the changes in the music industry, music going to digital, and looking at ways that people could galvanise and kind of work together to create a new music infrastructure. And then finally on my musical journey, although it's much bigger than this, I'm not a DJ, but I love collecting music. So wherever I go in the world, and I travel a lot, I try and find new music. I go to clubs and I ask the DJ what tracks they're playing, and I collect all this music from all over the world, and then I try and play it. So I like to play Brazilian music in Bosnia, or I like to play South African music somewhere else, to kind of share sounds and kind of give people experiences of other cultures through music. So what is music to me at this point? So music was about entertainment. It was about going out, going to concerts, enjoying yourself, having a great time with your friends. For me, music was my identity as a musician, as a record label owner, as a music lover. Music is everything in me. Music also gave me a community, so people around me that were like-minded, creative people who I could kind of interact with around music. For me, music was also my education. It gave me a perspective on the world through the lens of music and song and lyrics. Music gave me a sense of belonging to Manchester. It made me feel proud to be part of my city. And music is culture. So this was my perspective, and then I went here. So, working with Martin, who I think I can see at the back, I went to a place called Medellin in Colombia, and this moment changed everything in my life after. It changed my perspective on everything, and particularly on what music can do. So I was in Medellin to make an event with Martin, an Unconvention event, and we met a hip-hop artist while we were there, and he said, if it wasn't for hip-hop, I would be dead. Hip-hop gave me another option in life, and I'm truly grateful for that. This is a guy called MC Lupa. And I was like, wow, I love music, but I've never, thought about music in terms of, being dead, or, getting me out of a bad situation. So many of you will know that Colombia has had a kind of slightly troubled history. It's one of the world's leading exporters of the drug cocaine. And, it's suffered from things like a failed state, drug cartels, paramilitary presence, and a failed state. Since 1987, over 40,000 young men aged between 14 and 24 have been murdered in Medellin. And there's this saying which is, we were born to die in Medellin. So young men expected they would maybe, live until the age of 24, and that was kind of their only option. So in the city, inspired by bands like Public Enemy, the kind of US hip-hop movement, young people in the city created their own hip-hop movement. It kind of started out with young kids putting pieces of cardboard on the floor and, doing breakdancing, and then people started rapping and performing across the city. And music became this kind of non-violent alternative to being in drug cartels. It enabled men to be men, but without the violence, and gave men and women the opportunity to kind of express themselves and talk about their reality and what was happening around them. There are about 2,500 hip-hop artists in the city of Medellin, and hip-hop is really a way of life and a complete alternative to being involved in drug cartels. So for me, this music movement that was not funded, it was completely organic, managed to be a very big contributing factor to the massive changes that have happened across Medellin over the past, decade. So that was my first experience of music where it could make real change, and then it kind of took me on this journey all around the world. So I just want to talk about a few more examples of where music, for me, has been inspiring and impactful. This is a guy called Benny, and Benny's based in a place called Chigum in the north of Uganda. So it's kind of the war-affected area. And Benny has an organisation called Northern Ugandan Hip Hop Culture. And his organisation is a hip hop agribusiness. So essentially, he has 15 hip hop artists, and they have a farm. So they do things like make honey, so they keep bees. And they grow produce. And they take this produce, and the profit they make from the sale of the produce enables the hip hop artists to go into the local prison and deliver hip hop workshops, creative workshops with the prisoners. And the result of this is that the prisoners, once they come out of the prison, they don't end up going back in. They go and find Benny, and they become part of his movement and part of his group. So for me, again, a social enterprise and an example of where music is being used as a tool to create opportunity, to transform and rehabilitate prisoners. So this next example, you will probably know this man because he's been in the news kind of over the past few weeks. You may recognise him as being the leader of Zimbabwe, or just for his fabulous jackets. This is Robert Mugabe, and he was until a couple of weeks ago the leader of ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe is really interesting because if you were in Zimbabwe, and probably still the same situation, it's really impossible to speak out about the political system there. You can't question the government. There's no opportunity to do that. When I've been in a bar and someone's tried to talk about politics, everybody is quiet. It's not allowed, because you might be taken and tortured and disappeared. This organisation in Zimbabwe called Magamba used music as a tool to create a space, a physical space, where in this place where you can't talk about music in a bar, they create a festival called Shoko, where performers, artists, comedians can take to the stage in front of thousands of people and satirise and question the government. And for me, this is a really interesting use of music as a space for questioning. Music that creates a space where everyone in there, they don't get arrested, they don't get tortured, and there's an opportunity through music to question something that without it wouldn't happen. The next example I want to talk about is a guy called Rami Assam. So Rami Assam was involved in the Egyptian revolution, and he's a musician and a performer. And his music was played in Tahrir Square in front of millions of people. And at the time when Mubarak was taken down, his song was being sung, Irhal, it means leave. And his song was being sung by millions of people. And his music was able to galvanise people, keep people's spirits there, and used as a form of protest. What happened to Rami was that after he was performing, he was taken to the Egyptian Museum, and he was taken and he was tortured for like 10 hours. And it was really, really bad. And I think this for me is an example of where music is so powerful. Just a guy with a guitar is so powerful that the state fear it so much that they can take that person and torture them because they play a guitar. So you can imagine that music there in that situation is galvanizing people and is really, really important protest tool. So I want to now show just a few images, and I'm just going to talk through these. I find that these images are really powerful in terms of thinking about music, particularly in war zones. So this first one is from the war in Chechnya, and it's a Russian soldier playing a deserted piano. The next one is from Damascus, and again you can see that the whole of this place has been kind of obliterated by war, and yet there's a piano there with a guy playing it, and so the music keeps on. I love this photograph, I just think it's so powerful, and it shows a pianist who's set up in front of the armed police the day after protesters in Kiev brought down the statue of Lenin, and he played Chopin. And this last example is from Brazil, and this is an orchestra that are playing at the funeral of a guy called Evandro Roa da Silva, who's the coordinator of an organisation called Afro Reggae. Afro Reggae is a great organisation here that engages music and young people in the favelas. And this was at his funeral, and again you can see the power of what that person and music means to this young kid. Okay, so this journey, there's so many more examples, but for me now, music became something completely different. Music became about freedom of expression. It became about a form of protest. I could see how music could all of a sudden bring around change and opportunity on quite a big scale in communities. Music is about community, it can be about reconciliation, an alternative to being in gangs, alternative to violence. It can be about education, so in the case of Afro Reggae, taking young people out of the favela and giving them new transferable skills. It can still be about entertainment. Just because you're in a war zone doesn't mean that you need that kind of entertainment happening as well. And it can also be a really good tool for escape, so taking you out of this violent world around you and for a few moments helping you forget about that. So that was kind of my journey, and I remember going back to Manchester after doing all of this work all over the world, and I put on a gig in Manchester, as I quite often do, and I had this band playing, four white guys, playing guitars. They're really famous now, and this was a small gig, sold out, it was brilliant, and I remember standing at the back and just thinking, so what? For me, what I'd seen in the world had changed the perspective of what music can do and how powerful music can be, to a point where I was like, I want to just immerse myself in that world where music can just make incredible, positive change. So it kind of brings me to, I guess, what I do with my organisation. So my organisation is called In Place of War, and we've been around for 15 years now. So our work started with a question, and the question was, do people make art when bombs are dropping on their heads? So if you're in the middle of a war zone, is art being made? Is theatre being made? Is music being made? Is creativity happening? And if it is happening, why is art so important that it happens, and it can happen when bombs are dropping on your head? So we did loads of research around this, and we became connected to a lot of the things and examples I've just shown you. A lot of the time in our work, we get asked a question which is, why art? And that's followed by, why art, not aid? By aid, I mean food and shelter and medicine. And people say, why art, not aid? Without aid, people are going to die. And I think my perspective on this is quite different. I think that art gives something else. We look at an African context, and we've been sending aid to Africa for a very long time. But fundamentally, things don't change, because the root causes, the root issues are never addressed. But art gives hope, opportunity, and a capacity to make change, a capacity for local people to make the change they want to see on their own terms. So In Place of War, our organisation says when creativity conquers conflict. So In Place of War is a global organisation that uses creativity in places of conflict as a tool for positive change. We enable grassroots change makers in music, theatre and across the arts to transform a culture of violence and suffering into hope, opportunity and freedom. So I'm going to now talk through the different sort of strands of work and give you some examples of actually the nuts and bolts of what we do. So we began with research. We wanted to understand, what does art do, what works, what doesn't, what are examples of brilliant practice out there. And, sorry, can you go back? And so what we did through this research is we created this incredible network of change makers across the world who are using art to make change. And often these people are young people, they don't have funding, they're just using art because they know it has the capacity to make incredible change. So we do three main things. The first one is around education. So we believe that young people in communities across the world are incredibly talented. There's this abundance of creativity, but there's a kind of gap between people's creativity and the capacity to do something more with it, to make money from it, to make a living from it. So we have a program that helps people understand how they can make a living from their creativity. So it's a kind of creative entrepreneurial program. And we developed this program with 40 different countries involved and case studies from all over the world. And we go out and we train trainers so they can have all of these resources. They have this program certified by a university in the UK, and they can then help people in their communities understand how they can make a living. So these are some photographs from some of the places we've done the training. We've trained people in, I think, 20 countries across the world. And this was the most recent one in Soweto in South Africa, which was really amazing. So we believe that giving people the tools and capacity to build their own opportunities and futures is essential for making long-term, impactful and meaningful change in the world's most marginalised communities. So yeah, we've trained people across many countries in many different languages, and the results have been really incredible, people creating and starting their own businesses with their creative talent. So the next thing that we're really interested in as an organisation, and in fact, it was inspired a lot by what we've seen in Brazil and Colombia, a lot across Latin America, is the idea of having a physical space in a community with creative activity happening inside it. And just having that space can transform the community that it's located in. So we've been very inspired by places like this. So this is Tuna El Fuerte in Venezuela, in Caracas. And this is a remarkable space made out of converted shipping containers. And every week, more than 500 young people are going to this space, which is in a very kind of, I guess, marginalised or dangerous community. But inside the space, there are no guns, there's no crime. It's an open space for everyone in the community, owned by the community. And people are learning musical instruments, they're learning to dance, they're learning to rap, they're doing all of these incredible activities and taking people out of a kind of violent alternative in the community. Again, inspired by spaces like Afro Reggae here in Brazil, that's kind of been expanded over the years into this kind of remarkable space in the community, offering all this incredible creative activity. And I'm just going to show a really quick video of Tuna El Fuerte, just because it's kind of my favourite cultural space in the world. With our organisation is we help people to create cultural spaces in communities that don't have them, primarily in Africa, across Africa and in the Middle East. So we're creating spaces in places like Palestine, South Africa, Uganda, Zimbabwe, inspired by these incredible spaces across Latin America. And I think we have another video. So this is a first edit of a video of our recent trip to Soweto. So what we do, I should mention, is we collect equipment in the UK. So we collected hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of equipment working with the music industry. And we take it and we check it and we package it all up and we then use that as a kind of catalyst to create new spaces. So this is our recent visit to Soweto. And I should just also add, we also take people to train people in how to use the equipment. So you're going to see a bit of that in this video, The guys that were being trained by a venue in the UK called Ronnie Scott's, which is like this iconic jazz venue. And the people that they were training had had no experience of sound production, and at the end of the week they made a festival. So it was like really, really incredible. So yeah.
And this is my lover, Mandela Mageza, and we started Trackside Creative. Thank you for the love, and yeah. Why run away without love? No, word to my sister girls.
Trackside was a disused electronics shop that's been made into this incredible kind of cultural space, you know, somewhere that was just a space, that's all it was. But it was known that if you went there, you could start to connect with other people, other like-minded people who want to be creative, who want to make projects, who want to make things happen in the community.
Trackside shares a space with a funeral undertaker who is my father, his father as well, so it's a family business, you know. It's just that it's taking on another trajectory at the moment, including entertainment as well as burying loved ones.
Trackside has existed for 4 years, completely unfunded, run by the incredible forces of Mambila and Tabiseng, and their will and drive has meant that the community has kind of galvanised around this physical space. That's an incredibly positive thing. This week has been a culmination of months of work between Trackside and In Place of War, and it's been about mobilising equipment that we've collected over months in the UK, building a studio, building a live sound system, providing the tools that people need to actually make creative stuff happen through music.
Ruth was like, yo guys, would you like to be part of our network? This is how it works, these are the conditions, and we think, you know, if you just write us a wish list. We were like, wish list? Is this Christmas or something? What? No ways, it's never gonna happen. Okay, fine. That's just too good to be true. Like anything? But there it is, In Place of War, we're like, blow, here you go, you know, here you go.
Like just the storage case, but it looks like they give you a whole lot of microphones.
We brought people to train, so we brought people from the iconic London venue Ronnie Scott's to train people in how to use that equipment so that they can run the space after we leave.
Okay, and then we're going to go down.
Oh, that's that TV shit.
This is the big mixing desk that came. This worked for 9 years in Ronnie Scott's. Sting, all sorts of people. Right? Ronnie Scott's is in Soho in London. It's been going nearly 60 years now. It's one of the oldest jazz clubs in the world, I guess, and we have shows 7 days a week. Well, this mixing desk is 10 years old. It's had a very good innings in the club, and we didn't want to sell it. We wanted to give it to somebody that would really get good use from it, so it has another life. And so as part of our charitable foundation, we hooked up with In Place of War, found Trackside and thought this was an ideal place to take this desk, so here we are.
Taught us so much how to connect the mics, how to connect the basses, how to check the buzzes, check everything. The desk is amazing, the desk, bro. Yo, it's shocking. Like it can make anything, baba. A festival, even
In communities where young people don't have anything to do, generally they resort into some kind of negative or violent behaviour. What a cultural space does in a community is, on a basic level, give young people something to do. And when you introduce music and theatre and dance and art into that space, it also gives young people the ability to express how they feel. And it's really, really important for everybody to be able to be creative. The impact of that on the community is that young people are not engaging in violent activity, young people are actually getting more engaged in education, and then inevitably young people are going and getting jobs and building positive futures and families within the community. We've seen this across the world in so many different contexts. Having a space where young people can go is key to their future.
What's happening tonight is that we are throwing a showcase with some of the greatest local artists from around. Very, 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 very happy to have them here. And yeah, we We're gonna have the biggest party of the year. We're gonna have the party of the year. DJ Yoda is in the place as well to bless us with you know, on the ones and twos.
Okay, I know we are. You guys are so best.
So yeah, so that was the project in Soweto, which was happened really recently. Thank you. And it was amazing. It was amazing. And I found out last week that the guys, they never had any funding before, and they just got 3 years worth of funding because of what's happened. So they're able to now sustain themselves, and he can give up his job working somewhere else, and he can now do this full time. So it's amazing. So In Place of All believes that the creation of cultural spaces saves people's lives, giving those in the most marginalised communities the opportunity to express themselves, be positive role models, be creative, and receive alternative education and build new opportunities. So we're really, really, interested in creating more and more spaces. And next year we're hoping to also create one in Medellin, which I talked about before, working with 2 local hip hop artists. Okay, so the final thing that we do, the final kind of pillar of our work, is around artistic collaboration. I love it when people get together who probably aren't supposed to and be creative, whether it be in theatre or dance or music, because incredible things happen that haven't happened before. We do a whole bunch of things. So we take artists from different parts of the world to communities to create music in very sort of isolated or marginalised situations. So this photograph, for example, is we took some German and UK dance artists to Uganda, creating collaborations with local artists. We record those collaborations and we release them, and the idea is to kind of help expand the presence of these artists who are located in these kind of marginalised situations. And I wanted to show a video, because it's got some Brazilian artists on it, of a recent collaboration project that we made in Zimbabwe. And we have a rapper called Marcelo, or he's known as Dugatu, from Rio, and a producer called Rafael Tudesco. And we took these guys with some other artists from across the world to Zimbabwe, and this is what happened.
Well, it's a musical thing called Empire Records. Dancehall in Zimbabwe. Dancehall is big. It's Jamaicans. They really inspired us. Every youth, they listen to dancehall. Even the elders, they now appreciate dancehall. Papai, Nova, Papai, Tamoa, Bending, Good, Darling, Good, Comadova, Pachi, Town, to Kingston, Tandibata, Guitar, in Town. Here, musically, you can't talk about politics. We don't really practice freedom of speech. You have to watch what you say, you have to watch what you sing, because, people are scared of what's going to happen to them. We're going to Cheat Town, aka Chitumbiza. Not like Giza. That's where I'm from. Born and bred in Cheat Town.
That's a D. I have never ever seen somebody with that much stage presence and energy. Now understand, in Chitumbiza, he's a god. He's like a superstar, a massive superstar in Chitumbiza. So when the kids see him on stage, they lose their minds. It doesn't matter how old you are, you see that D on stage, you're losing your mind.
Well, I'm a fireman. I am a fireman, so anytime I'm on stage, fire will ignite. I sing about what I see, what I live, what I get, like what we're doing now. Whatever that surrounds me, I make a tune about it. Life is really difficult for local artists, but in place of war, they came through with the intention of spreading a good vibe through the name of music. They have made it possible for us to do collaborations. Artists from Brazil, artists from the United States, artists from South Africa. Oh yeah, yesterday we had a meeting with the guys I'm working with. It was amazing. We were supposed just to link up and just reason and get to know each other. It we hear them doing what we do. I was with Marcelo and his producer, Rafael from Brazil. Amazing. Room service.
We were all set up at this hotel. We had like this room there. So it was pretty cool. We just got all the equipment set up in the room, you know, brought all the people in, you know, had the vibes coming and like just made the music, you know.
For connecting people in the world, this is important. I think it's a different space, different culture, different religion, you know. I think this is very, very important to connecting people.
I think it's important to collaborate because now, after this, we have this exchange that's happening because of the music.
We are now in Chicago. Hey! You know what I'm saying? This is childhood. Born here, bred here. My talent boosted up in here. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, that's my family in the playground there. That's my family. You know what I mean?
This whole collaboration was brought together by In Place of Who. It's really important and it's really dope. Because now people like me get to vibe with people like Raphael, who on a normal day, I probably wouldn't be able to meet him.
Super dope in Place of War is here in Africa, it's going to Middle East, South America, and we're doing this all over the world and bringing culture and music everywhere, you know.
So that was the recent project in Zimbabwe. So really, I think key to this work is about the fact that we believe that mobilising cultural leaders and exceptional creative talent from the world's most marginalised communities can build new networks of support, provide a global platform for creative talent and share ideas and innovations essential to making significant positive change in the world led by young people. So there is a lot of power in collaboration. Which brings me to the final thing that I want to talk about today, which is another one of our projects that comes under the brackets of collaboration, but it's probably my favourite project that we do as an organisation. It's a kind of new project that's been happening over the past couple of years, and it's called Girl. So I want you to imagine that you are a young woman living in a remote township. Domestic violence, rape and conflict is frequent. Opportunities are limited. There's a 98% unemployment rate in your community, and as a woman you're expected not to work but to do more traditional work around childcare. Protest and speaking out is forbidden and can end you in being disappeared. Imagine that you are a young woman living in a community at conflict in a drug cartel of Medellin, Colombia. Every day you face violence around you, dominated by men in your community, and you struggle to find a space to express yourself. Or imagine you live in a favela in SãO Paulo where you face racism and discrimination. You're a woman wanting a different future for young people in your community, but you feel voiceless. So, how can you make any change in your community when you are silenced? So, this Girl project kind of started with this woman. So this woman is called African Woman Arise, and she's based in the Makokoba township of Zimbabwe. And I was on a visit to Zimbabwe, and I was in just on a day out, and I went to a hip hop show. And I was there the whole day, and the whole day there were like just guys performing, and the whole of the audience was men. And then this guy said to me, in a moment, a girl's gonna come out, she's gonna be dressed in like indigenous clothes, and she's gonna perform. And I just couldn't believe that could happen in this really male space. And sure enough, she came out and she threw herself on the floor and she reenacted a scene of domestic violence, and then she rapped. And it was one of the best things that I've ever seen. Not only was she probably one of the best rappers I've ever seen in the world, but the guys in the audience were so engaged. They were like singing the words back at her, and she was talking about the issues that are faced by women in the communities that they live in. And I was like, wow, this is really, really powerful. This is amazing. So the other thing that kind of led me to create this project is that the most marginalised voices in the world are those of women of colour. So quite often I'll be at music industry events or all sorts of big events where the decision makers are the people in those spaces. And I always look around and I kind of do a head count of how many women are in the space. And then I do a head count of how many women of colour are in that space. And I can tell you that generally there are none. And this for me is just incredibly sad. How can we make great change in the world if the voices of everyone are not represented? And so that kind of led me onto the creation of Girl. So for me this absolutely has to change. And so how do we make that change in the ways that we can? So we created Girl. And Girl is a group of women from different places across the world, marginalised communities, some places of conflict. And we have women from 9 different countries involved in the project. And they come together and they create new music together. So they collaborate, they write new music. That's kind of based on all of their stories, all of their collective stories of being a woman in their communities. This is what they look like. We have women from Brazil, Zimbabwe, Ghana, South Africa, Bangladesh. And these women came together just for a week to collaborate, and they'd done some work online before. And then they go out and we put them on festival platforms across the UK. So not only do they perform in the festivals, but they also do conversations, so they have an opportunity to actually talk about the real issues in their community, which is, for me, I can't decide what's more powerful. Because when you have a panel of women and women of colour, you never see that. So when they speak in a room, I moderated a panel that they did in a festival. And this is in a music festival, and we had hundreds of people watching this panel. People were crying, people were engaged, everyone wanted to ask questions. This is a really powerful moment. And then we have them on the main stage headlining festivals in the UK. Women artists of colour. And not only are they women artists of colour, they are incredible at what they do. They are just the most remarkable performers. So I want to show you a quick video, it's only short, just to sort of show the project.
And when we come together and sing, you can hardly tell we are from different countries. It's like branches of the same tree.
We are focusing on the unity aspect of music. We are focusing on uniting the world, and comforting as well, comforting the world, motivating, so it's really powerful, really, really powerful.
To work with these girls from all over the world, and each one of them bringing their seasonings, their culture, their story, all in their back, ready to go, ready to show the world and put their flavors in this melting pot of music, is just amazing.
By collaborating with so many women from different countries, you get to learn and experience each other's worlds and learn and share and inspire each other.
Collaborate together, come different women, from different cultures, is the power and the music together is full power.
So that was Girl from this summer. Oh, can you just move this one on to the next? Thanks. Okay, so there's a quote here. This is from a rapper from Medellin. She's not involved in this project, but we've worked with her in the past. And she says, I always talk about being a woman in between a world that is ruled by men. I also talk about education, knowledge, and the importance to turn off mass media and awakening. I have to be grateful with hip-hop. It gave me my personality. And we hear this so much in the work that we do. So, for me, why was it so powerful? Well, I think it was really powerful because it hadn't been done before. I've not seen this before. And it was really powerful because the women did it on exactly their own terms. They made the music they wanted to make, they talked about the things they wanted to talk about, they did it in their own languages. It wasn't in English, it was in all sorts of different languages which they learned and shared with each other. And it just put this in, on the main stage in festivals. And I think it was really powerful because it was really, really good. It's really amazing. It sounds great, they're incredible performers. And audiences were really, really, really engaged with what they had to say. And so how does it amplify the voices of marginalised women? So it does a whole bunch of things. It's about the development of role models. So in these communities where these women are from, other young women can see that these women were able to do something and speak out about the situations and challenges in their communities. So hopefully it inspires other people from the communities. It's about the creation of networks of strong women, so bringing together women so they can kind of form a family. We have WhatsApp groups, they're in touch with each other every single day, supporting each other, helping each other, collaborating with each other. It's about the development of women creatively, helping women to express themselves, learn new skills. And it's about a connection and platforms to tell their stories of their communities to the whole world, because quite often they never get the opportunity to do that. And it's about highlighting struggle and explore ways of making change. So one of the things we are doing with the project is going back to each of the women's communities and supporting projects that they want to happen in their communities. So the profit we make from the music that we put out there goes right back directly to help women and girls in these communities across the world. And it's about challenging stereotypes. It's about saying women are brilliant, women artists of colour are amazing, and they deserve to be on the main stage in all festivals. And then the other thing that's really important to me is about the music industry. So this is a photograph, a kind of collage of festival posters from the UK with all of the male artists removed from the festival bill. And if you look at a festival called Download, it's a rock festival, but there are like 2 or 3 artists left on the whole festival. They'll have like 200 acts playing. So for me, in the day and age that we're in, still women are not there, they're not performing, they're not making it to these festival platforms. I don't know what percentage that would be, but in this case, it's like less than 1% of the artists performing at Download are women. So for me, it's all about challenging that and putting women right on the main stage, right up there, to show that this is necessary. Lima, who's from Brazil, she was the music director of this project. She's amazing, and she said, "Girl has been a sweet reminder of women, in many aspects, the powerful, the motherly, the dramatic, the beautiful. After working years among men and having my woman time as a mum mainly, it opened my eyes to working with them in the music industry and supporting women, made me feel really part and proud of it all." And so what's next for Girl? Well, Girl they've recorded an album which sounds amazing, and we're going to release this album and they'll be touring around the world next year. And as I said, we're doing more projects rooted back in their communities to really amplify the impact of what they're doing. And that's what they look like. So that's kind of the work of In Place of War. We do so many things in so many different places. And I think just to go back to the beginning of this, it's going to be weird if you weren't here for the beginning, but finally my song would be Unfinished Sympathy by Massive Attack. This is what I would have played at my funeral. We've been on a journey for people who arrived slightly after the start. So that's me, and that's In Place of War. Thank you so much for being so receptive and brilliant. I think because it's kind of the last panel, I'm not going to do questions, but if you have anything that you'd like to ask me, you can just come and find me. I'm going to be around, and my email address and details are there, so feel free to be in touch. Thank you. Up to that.